I was a woman dying from a terminal illness. But to the man I loved, I was nothing. Even when I was alone in a hospital bed, begging for help, he was too busy fooling around with someone else. When Jason Smith arrived at the hospital, he saw Julia Lopez sitting there, dazed and hollow. Her thin frame was trembling, lips tinged blue from the cold. "Go home first," Jason Smith said as he walked up. "Jason Smith, where's your necklace?" Julia Lopez suddenly asked. Jason Smith froze. Then anger clouded his face. "Do you even know what you've done? And you're still asking about a necklace? Julia Lopez, when did you become so heartless?" Julia Lopez stared blankly at him. "Yeah, I'm heartless. That's why I'm staying to watch Latina Mera wake up to a world of pain." "Julia Lopez," Jason Smith snapped. His hand moved before his brain caught up. He raised it and slapped her. Her face jerked to the side from the impact, but her expression didn't change. Only a deep, numbing emptiness filled her eyes. Jason Smith froze. In all these years, he had never hit her before. "You done? Want to get the other side too?" Julia Lopez asked, voice flat but defiant. "You're insane," Jason Smith muttered, exhausted. What happened to the warm, gentle woman he once knew? The red mark on her face made his chest twist tighter. Just then, the emergency light turned off. Latina Mera, pale as a ghost, was wheeled into the intensive care unit. A nurse said, "The baby couldn't be saved. Once she wakes up, watch her emotions closely." Jason Smith let go of Julia Lopez. "Happy now? Want to go inside and see for yourself?" The coldness in his voice made Julia Lopez shiver. She looked at Latina Mera's lifeless face. She couldn't tell whether what she felt was sorrow or emptiness. "Still not leaving. Waiting for Latina Mera to wake up and start a fight to the death with you." Jason Smith's frustration grew. "At least she has a reason to fight with me. What about us?" Julia Lopez stared deep into his eyes, then turned and walked out the door. Jason Smith's foot twitched. But in the end, he didn't follow. Latina Mera woke up in the late afternoon. When she saw Jason Smith by her bedside, something in her eyes shifted. Her voice was laced with venom. "I want justice for my child." No, Jason Smith didn't even hesitate. "Jason Smith, that was your child." Latina Mera's eyes widened as she shouted. "If you hadn't gone there in the first place, none of this would have happened. I'll compensate you for the baby," Jason Smith said flatly. "Even if I ask you to marry me as compensation," Latina Mera hissed. "You know that's not possible," Jason Smith snapped. What he hated most was people who couldn't recognize their place, always trying to climb into his life. "Maybe you don't know," Latina Mera said calmly, her eyes glinting like a serpent. "Carlos Mera is my father." Jason Smith's expression shifted. The CEO of Zhongxing? Latina Mera thought she had won until he spoke again. "Then, let's see if your father can actually touch me." Back home, Julia Lopez locked the door behind her. The calm she'd been faking collapsed in an instant. She crumpled to the floor, biting her fist to keep from screaming loud enough for the neighbors to hear. She knew it was time to leave. 9 years. Her life couldn't end on such a pathetic note. She dragged a suitcase from under the bed. After glancing around the room, she quietly packed. There really wasn't much to take. Over these 9 years, Jason Smith had become a successful man, adored by many, but she never once chased after his fame or wealth. The only thing she ever wanted his heart she didn't want anymore. Julia Lopez put on her thickest coat, gathered her ID and bank cards. She looked around one last time, then walked out the door without hesitation. At the hospital, Latina Mera's whole body trembled when she heard his words. "Julia Lopez matters that much to you, enough to ruin your entire reputation." "Think whatever you want." Jason Smith stood up. "Stay here and recover. When you're ready, go to HR to settle your paycheck." Latina Mera understood this was a clean break. Her voice cracked as she cried out, "President Jason, I was wrong. I'll stop all those silly thoughts. Please don't leave me." "This is it for us, Latina Mera." Jason Smith walked away, his back firm and unyielding. After leaving the hospital, Jason Smith drove to the apartment complex. He sat quietly in the car, lit a cigarette, trying to figure out what to say to Julia Lopez. Knowing her temper, sweet words might work. He had decided to cut off everything outside. This shouldn't be too hard to fix. He stubbed out the cigarette, stepped out of the car, and looked up. His gut told him something was off. It was already dark outside, so why were the lights still off in the apartment? A heavy sense of dread gripped him. Jason Smith rushed upstairs, skipping steps, and unlocked the door. Silence, not a trace of human presence. "Julia Lopez?" he called out cautiously. No response. He flipped on the lights. Everything inside was neat and in place. But that empty room, it felt like a boulder crushing his chest. He could barely breathe. Jason Smith pulled out his phone and dialed her number. It was turned off. "Damn it," he called his assistant. "Get the local precinct chief. Julia Lopez is gone." Elsewhere, Julia Lopez walked through wind and snow. The streets looked both familiar and foreign. She had no idea where to go. A wave of helplessness surged inside her. Turning a corner, she suddenly felt warmth trickling from her nose. She wiped it instinctively. Her palm was covered in blood. Panic rose, but her mind stayed clear. She tilted her head back, pressed tissues to her nose, and stood still. She thought it was just another symptom, but after the bleeding came the dizziness. By the time she realized something was wrong, she was already collapsing. There were few people on the street. She lifted her hand weakly, then fell into darkness. Jason Smith sat in his office, the ashtray in front of him overflowing with cigarette butts. He had imagined Julia Lopez, yelling, crying, throwing fits, but not this, not walking into an empty home without her. Only now did he understand what it meant to be irreplaceable. Carlos Garcia walked in. Seeing Jason Smith's face, he asked gently, "Still no luck?" "President Jason, I checked all nearby traffic cameras. No sign of her." Carlos Garcia braced for the outburst. But Jason Smith just waved a hand and said, "Keep looking." He reached for another cigarette, but the box was empty. Frustrated, he tossed it aside. Then it hit him, that guy, the one who dropped Julia Lopez off that night. "Carlos Garcia, pull the footage from the 27th Street cam outside my building." At the hospital, Tony Camel stared at the furious man in front of him, rage simmering in his own chest. "Julia Lopez is your wife. You couldn't keep her safe. What do you want from me?" But even as he spoke, Tony Camel couldn't help but wonder, why hadn't she come back for her follow-up? Was she really planning to face death alone? He couldn't explain it, but the thought of Julia Lopez disappearing from this world unsettled him deeply. He didn't want to examine that feeling too closely. Jason Smith caught the shift in his expression, but said nothing, his own questions unresolved. He pointed and growled, "You better not be lying to me." Things had already spiraled out of control. And now, it turned out this guy was actually a doctor. Julia Lopez barely knew anyone, so where the hell could she have gone? Standing outside the hospital, Jason Smith watched the snow fall and suddenly remembered something critical he had completely overlooked. He strode back into the office. "You said you and Julia Lopez were doctor and patient. Then tell me, what illness does she have?" "A small apartment in the western suburbs." Julia Lopez slowly opened her eyes, then jolted upright. The place was unfamiliar. She wasn't in a hospital. She tried to sit up, panicked, but her wrists were tied tightly to the bed. A thick wave of dread surged through her. "Is anyone there? Help!" she cried out. Just then, the door creaked open. A pale, hate-filled face appeared in the doorway. That was when Julia Lopez realized things had spiraled out of control. She frowned. "Latina Mera, what are you trying to do?" Latina Mera sneered. "What do I want? You'll know soon enough. You strip her." Julia Lopez's pupils contracted sharply. She struggled, but it was no use. Two servants quickly tore her clothes into rags. Before she could react, a camera flash went off. Julia Lopez froze in horror. "Latina Mera, What the hell are you doing? Jason Smith will never forgive you. Oh, didn't Jason tell you? He's going to marry me, Latina Mara said coldly. She didn't wait for Julia Lopez's reaction. She turned and left, slamming the door. Edit the photos on my phone. You know what to do. Julia Lopez, I lost my baby because of you. Did you really think you wouldn't pay for it? Latina Mara's lips curled into a cruel smile. Julia Lopez stared at the closed door in shock. Her voice was barely a whisper. No, Jason Smith would never do this. He wouldn't. She scanned the room, frantically searching for any possible way to escape. Meanwhile, Jason Smith was rocked by the words Tony Kamel had just spoken like a thunderclap to the head. It took him a long moment to react. His voice cracked, hoarse beyond recognition. Leukemia? Are you joking? Tony Kamel laced his fingers, speaking coolly. You're her husband. You never noticed her body wasting away. The pale face, day after day. Did she really never tell you her diagnosis? Jason Smith stumbled back 2 steps. Every word Tony Kamel said drilled into his ears clear, cruel, and impossible to unhear. Leukemia, that terrifying word. How could it be happening to Julia Lopez? Tony Kamel stared at the man's ashen face without pity. Mr. Jason, Julia Lopez doesn't have much time left. Are you happy now? He threw on his coat and walked out without looking back. For 3 days straight, Jason Smith used every resource he had, but it was like Julia Lopez had vanished from the earth. The more time passed, the heavier the weight in his chest. Every time he thought about the word leukemia, a chill ran down his spine. Where could she have gone, dragging that sick, broken body? Jason Smith ran a hand through his hair, full of regret. When Julia Lopez told him, I really have leukemia, what was he doing? He didn't want to think about what came after that. Just then, a text notification lit up his phone. He grabbed it instantly, but the moment he opened it, it felt like his blood reversed direction. It was a photo message from an unknown number. Julia Lopez lay disheveled on a bed, and the man beside her was Tony Kamel. 2 sleepless nights, and his explosive rage collided all at once. Jason Smith clenched his jaw so tightly his teeth nearly cracked. Bloodshot veins crawled across his eyes. Disappeared? Leukemia? What a joke. Just an excuse to run off with her lover. Jason Smith hurled the phone across the room. Julia Lopez, teaming up with Tony Kamel to trick me? You really went there? After a moment of silence, he picked up the phone and barked into the intercom. Call everyone back. Stop the search. A woman like that didn't deserve his time. If she wanted to play dirty, she couldn't blame him for doing the same. And spread the word I'll be marrying Latina Mara in 1 week.